Ajnanaतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानं जनाशलाकया चाक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नाम श्रेष्ठं मनुमापि सच्चिपुत्रं आत्रास्वरूपं रूपं तस्य ग्रजमुरुपुरीं मथुरीं गष्टावतीं राधाकुण्डं गिरिवरं महो राधिकमधावसं प्राप्तो यस्य प्रतितकृपाया श्रीगुरुं तं नतोऽस्मि। वञ्चकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानं पवनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। निखिलश्रुतिमौलिरत्नमालद्युति निराजितपदपङ्कजन्त अजीमुक्तकुलैरुपश्यामनं परितस्त्वं हरिनाम संश्रयामि। अनार्पितचरिं चिरत् करुणायावतीर्णा खलु समार्पयितुं नतोऽस्मलरासं स्वभक्तिश्रियम्। हारीपुरतसुन्दराद्युतिकदम्बसन्दीपितः सदा हृदये कन्दरे स्फुरतो वासचिनन्दनः। अजानुलम्बितभुजो कनकावदातो सङ्कीर्तनैकपितरो कमलायतक्षो विश्वम्भरो द्वियावरो जुगधर्मपालो वन्दे जगत्प्रियकरो करुणावतारो। लादिनी शक्तिस्वरूपाय गौराङ्गासुहृदाय च भक्तशक्तिप्रदानाय गदाधर नमस्तुते। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिका कान्ता राधा कान्त नमोस्तुते। राधे वृन्दावनादिशे कारुणामृतवाहिनी कृपया निजपादब्जा दास्यन्मह्यं प्रदीयताम्। भक्त्या विहीना अपराधलक्षय क्षिप्तश्चाकमादितरङ्गमध्ये कृपामयि त्वां शरणं प्रपन्नं वृन्दे नमस्ते चरणारविन्दं वृन्दे नमस्ते चरणारविन्दम्। श्रील गुरुदेव की जय, श्रीमन महाप्रभु की जय, श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय, श्री श्री दाऊजी गोपाल जी की जय, ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, श्री वेणुगीता की जय, गौर भक्त वृंद की जय, गौर प्रमाण। हरि हरि बोल। So, good evening to all of you. Welcome for coming. Thank you. And today we are continuing with our series of lectures on Sri Venu-gita, or the Song of the Flute. We are in meeting number 6. I got lost. Yes. Whatever. Yes? Okay. 6, verse 5. And we are seeing verse number 5, second part. Yesterday we started verse number 5, and today we will continue by hopefully finishing. Let's see. Oh, well, hopefully never finishing, but we have to finish and continue in one sense, no? To restart again. Kirtaniya Sadahari. So we'll make a brief recap of what we saw yesterday, since it was the same verse, as we can connect one with the other. And the background to this 5th verse, remember, the gopis heard the flute of Krishna from the forest, and in the village they wanted to say something about that, about that among themselves, and their throat choked up and they were not able to speak, basically. So Sukadeva Goswami, empathizing with the gopis' experience and knowing what they will have liked to say, he's the one speaking in their name, if you will, this 5th verse. So yesterday we saw the first line of this verse, Barhapidam Natavarabapu Karnayu Karnikaram. So this verse in general is a verse that, as you have seen, is basically giving us, as we mentioned, the Krishna meditation, presenting all those defining qualities and attributes that make Braja Krishna who he is. Peacock feather, the flute, as we will see, the best of dancers, Karnikara flowers, Bhai Jayanti garland, and so on. Yellow cloth, today we will speak about that, his sweet flute, surrounded by gopas, entering the forest of Vrindavan. So this verse also is the one who uses the longest meter in the whole Venu-gita, like Sukadeva Goswami is having a lot to say, to share here, and trying to use a longer chanda than usual. And also we mentioned how this verse is one of at least 3 that generally our acharyas mention as one of the verses that Vyasa gave to the woodcutter for bringing the Atmaram Sukadeva Goswami back to his ashram, so he could school him in the Bhagavad, and it worked. So hopefully it works for us as well. So yesterday again we studied only the first line, first word, Barhapidam. If you want, you can remember Barhapidam, which means on his head a peacock. Now, sometimes he has so many peacock feathers that in the distance seems some dancing peacock is there, a crown of peacock feathers, basically. And we shared how this peacock feather in the eyes of our Guru Maharaj has an eye inside, which represents the principle of Tattva or Siddhanta, and has beauty, aesthetics, that represents the principle of Bhava or Rasa. So one should take us to the other. We also share how the peacock feather reached the head of Krishna, basically, this pastime with the peacock, giving that as an offering. It's an extended part of themselves as part of their heart, and basically their bhakti offering to Krishna, and Krishna dressing, ornamenting himself with bhakti and choosing to put a symbol of bhakti to keep that always above his head. We worship a God who has another altar of his own, who worships someone else. And of course, if you want to apply that to the ultimate consequences, implications, we have the bhakti that Krishna puts on his head above all is Radha's prem. And we mentioned and we showed how the name of Radha was included in the design, if you will, of the peacock feather even. No? So in this way, Krishna is always carrying Sri Radha in her non-different form, and her name always above his head whenever he goes, forever. You take the peacock feather out, you no longer have Braja Krishna. So then we spoke about Natavara Bapu, like his Bapu, his body is that of the best of dancers. So basically his body is Natavar. Sometimes that's described. Krishna's body is the best of dancers. We mentioned how everything in Krishna's body is dancing in the best possible way. His earrings, dolphin earrings, his garland, his eyes, his locks of hair, and his heart above all, and makes everything else dance. Now we developed some time about speaking about how generally we won't find any other avatar of Krishna dancing, only avatari, Sri Krishna, avatari, Sri Gaur Krishna. They are our Nataraj, our Natavaras, our greatest dancers. Also, we mentioned how the word Bara, apart from meaning like the best, refers to a boy who is just about to marry. So who will dance in celebration of the upcoming festivities. So that's a way of Krishna saying to the gopis, we are about to get married, in the sense of we are about to consummate our relation very soon, Rasa Lila, and so on. And also the word Natavara Bapu sometimes is presented by the Teresa Nata Nara Bapu, referring Nara to the idea of how the humanity, Nara, human beings, are put to dance by Krishna's dance. Or another meaning of Nata Nara Bapu was that he gets so absorbed in his dancing that everyone else in Vrindavan forgets his God. and see him in Nara terms, Nara Lila terms. He's human, he's one of us. And he himself naturally gets so absorbed in that celebratory movement that his own Abhiman or self-identification is, I'm a cowherd, a member of the cowherd community in Braj. Narayan is God. And we concluded also, as we have been concluding all these different elements, and we will continue doing so in connection with Sri Radha as well. Although Krishna is known as Natavar, king of dancers, at the same time, as Kumaras will say, Krishna says, Ami Sisya, and Sri Radha Guru Nata. She's the guru of dancing, and I'm a student in her school. So Krishna studies Premanatyam. I think Guru Maharaj put that name to the dancing school of Gaurangi Priya in North Carolina. Premanatyam, the dance of Prema. So Krishna is the first pupil in that school. He was the first one to sign. I sang in, I'm there. So I'm trying to follow those footsteps. Vrindavaneshwari Sri Radha ki jai. And we concluded briefly analyzing the expression of Karnakayo Karnikaram. So Karnayo Karnikaram. Karnayo means plural for the Karna, for the years. So in 2 years, Karnikaram, singular, one Karnikar flower. So we explained what's the meaning of in 2 years, one flower. Generally, it's explained these Karnikar flowers are friends of the sun, and they're following the course of the sun, looking at the east and during the day turning in that direction. So following that idea, Krishna is putting one Karnikar flower when he goes to the forest, when he's facing where the gopis are having darshan of him at the distance, and showing his best side with Karnikar flowers to the gopis. And when he's returning maybe from the other side, he's changing that same flower and putting that in another ear, showing the words of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the intoxication of his youth. Dira Lalita Nayak. So today we will see where we will end, but the idea will be to maybe go through the remaining 3 lines of this 5th verse, which will continue giving us different, again, defining attributes of Braj Krishna. So again, first verse we already saw Bharahapidam Nata Barabapu Karnayo Karnikaram. So now we will go to 2nd line, Bibrat Basa Kanaka Kapisham by Jayantim Chamalam. So first, let's see Bibrat Basa Kanaka Kapisham. That's the next attribute or concept. Bibrat Basa Kanaka Kapisham. Bibrat means wearing. As we mentioned, wearing can apply to all the things that it mentioned in this verse. He's wearing a garland, he's wearing peacock feather, he's wearing flute, he's wearing the form of the best of dancers, but more specifically, it applies to his clothes. Generally, you say, I'm wearing clothes. So Bibrat Basa, Basa means garments or clothes. So Bibrat Basa, he's wearing garments, and which is the color of those garments? Kanaka Kapisham. So Kanaka means like gold, and Kapisham means the Charyas mentioned something like a brownish yellow, something like that, brownish yellow. So he's wearing clothes like that are brownish yellow like gold. Now we will explain a little bit the meaning of that. But to begin with, in this connection, in Shastra it is mentioned that a person is considered attractive, if you will, by mainly three things, and they made like a play of words with these 3 things in Sanskrit, which is basasa, bachasa, and bayasa. Basasa is another word of saying basa here. Basa means clothes, so how he or she is dressing. Then you have bachasa, it comes from bak, how he or she speaks. It has to do with one's power of attraction, or how he sings, or in this case, how he plays the flute. It's another way of speaking or singing. Ambayasa means one's age, one's beauty, if you will. So when all these 3 things are expressed in the highest form, we are speaking about someone really attractive, or the all-attractive Krishna. So it is said that Krishna is, of course, the all-attractive. So he has all these 3 in the best possible way. He's Nitya Kishore, eternally youthful. When he speaks, as Guru said today, he's Bhavaduk. He can speak in every language and reproduce everything. Satyabhag, whatever he says comes through. And of course, Basas, as he said, he's dressing in a very elegant way. So this verse is describing all of this. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his purport, he mentions that it seems to be certain redundancies in this verse, which actually have some underlying meaning. No? For example, when he says Bibrat Basa, he wore clothes. I mean, yes, but you can save one word, if you will, there. And we know that our acharyas, when they compose verses, they try in most cases to be as concise as possible, to say with the minimum amount of words the idea that they want to convey. So in this case, it seems that they are using an extra word. So what's the purpose of Bibrat Basa? He wore clothes. But actually, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur said that this indicates that Krishna purposefully dressed in an artful way to display his youthful charms in order to incite the romantic desires of Radha. So that's the meaning of this apparent redundance. No? He wore clothes, like implying he dressed himself with certain specific intention. And that's it. That's how Shastra sometimes try to point at that and those in between meanings, no? By redundancy. And similarly, then it says, no, golden and yellow. No? So it seems also like it's enough with one of those two words. Why the two of them? So the same notion is applied here. No? That's a special dressing with a special specific purpose. And similarly, also they say regarding the Kanaka Kapisham, yellow, like gold and yellow, it is said that his dhoti is so golden that makes other form of gold look like brownish yellow. Basically, that's the idea also. His dhoti is the color of gold, and it's such a gold that puts to shame gold in itself. No? Becomes embarrassed. Many times in Shastra we hear this description. No? Krishna has this and did that. I don't know, like for example, Krishna's movements is kind of like a lion, or sometimes it's compared like the elephant. So it's such a scene, it's so impressive, like an elephant, like a lion, that it put to shame so much those animals that they run into the forest and disappear out of shame. No, and they start living in the forest because they were so ashamed. No, well, seeing the way of putting, no, how he walks, how he dresses, and so on. So also Krishna's yellow cloth is called Pitambara, which means in itself yellow cloth, but interestingly, it's also a name of Krishna. A name of Krishna, Pitambara, which means Pitambara means yellow cloth, but as the name of Krishna, it means he who wears yellow cloth. So there, he has that name in particular, Pitambara, but also it can be a descriptive adjective of his clothes. And this Pitambara sometimes also it's used as again, a further poetic analogy. As we mentioned, Krishna's body is that of the color of the dark cloud, and the Pitambara is compared to the molten gold. Pitambara is compared to a lightning, no? Like crossing this cloud, dark cloud of his hue. And sometimes in the flute, if you want to add further ingredients to the mantra Maya Upasana, the flute is compared to thundering. And the sound of the flute is like thundering. And his smile is compared to a rain shower of nectar coming from that dark cloud. And the peacock feather, as we mentioned, it was the rainbow in this analogy. And Krishna also sometimes uses a pearl necklace. Sometimes he describes the pearl necklace are like sometimes the birds flying like in bee in the air. So it's like the birds flying in such a sky, in such a cloudy sky. So all those ingredients represent that particular landscape, if you will. And as we mentioned, of course, needless to, we can always remember, this Pitambara, or these clothes that are like molten gold, we generally are accustomed to hear Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi also, no? Like Radha's hue is like molten gold. So again, Krishna is dressing in Radha's complexion, if you will, as Radha is doing, similarly dressing in Krishna's complexion. So externally, I mean, Krishna is internally full of Sri Radha, but it's not enough for him to be internally full. He has to express that externally also. So he dressed externally with her complexion. And the same for Sri Radha. Internally, she's full of Shyam, but it's not enough. Externally, she's dressing in the same color. So externally, Krishna is showing by wearing Pitambara. Externally, she's showing what is in his inside. Many, many nice sections in Shastra also describing this. I think that's in Vindalilamrita, if I'm not mistaken, when once, or many more than one Shastra, when sometimes there is a very nice elucidation on the color of Radha's nose pearl. So Sri Radha has a pearl below her nose, and generally the pearl is seen, the lower part of the pearl is seen red, and the higher part of the pearl is seen black. So sometimes the writers of those scriptures wonder, some people will think, okay, the red is because of a reflection of her lipstick, basically, and the higher black part of the pearl is because of a reflection of her eyeliner, the kajal. But they say, no. It's not like that. No. The part of red is her anurag, her passion, loving and passion that is depicted in the color red. Her inner loving passion, attachment for Krishna. And the black is Krishna's complexion, Shyam Sundar, which is full of, so inside she's full of those two colors, red and black, red and black. So that happens. Sometimes a connection with that is made also with the Gunja beads also as well. And the white there is connected to Radha's hue there. So, some brief words regarding Vibrat Bhasam Kanaka Kapisham, and then the end on the second line says Bhai Jayantim Chamalam. So Bhai Jayantim Chamalam, and Cha Bhai Jayanti Malam, and a garland called Bhai Jayanti, with the implication is, and he wears a garland called Bhai Jayanti. So that's a specific garland. It's not just one garland, but it's a specific garland with that particular name, which is a garland made of 5 different flowers, actually, which strung together made for what we call Bhai Jayanti Malam. And there are not any flower, but there's 5 specific flowers, which combined together are the Bhai Jayanti Mala, which are, one flower is called Mandara, another flower is the Kamala, or the lotus flower, another flower is called Kunda, another flower is the Parijata flower, and the 5th flower is Tulsi, which sometimes is maybe considered as a leaf, not as a flower, but actually in Shastra, Tulsi is also depicted that not only Pushpa or flower, but Pushpa Shara, which means the essence of all flowers. And that is so, as we see that for Krishna it's more than enough one Tulsi leaf or flower. So Pushpa Shara, the essence of all flowers, Tulsi. Remember how Advaita Acharya brought Mahaprabhu to the world, basically, due to the mercy of one Tulsi leaf, of course, the Bhakti of Advaita and so many other internal reasons and so on. But in one sense, you could make the case, yeah, Mahaprabhu came because of one Tulsi leaf. Shrimad Tulsi Maharani ki jai. So these 5 flowers put together, strung together, of course, in a particular way, make this Bhai Jayanti Mala, which is a garland that Krishna is always said to be wearing. And it's a garland that never, how to say in English, wilts. It's a garland that never wilts. And as we mentioned, among other of his ornaments, is always dancing in him. It's not like steel garland, like fixed or something, but it's always like moving, accompanying Krishna's inner, external dancing. And also the meaning of the garland, because the name of the garland is Bhai Jayanti. So what's the meaning of Bhai Jayanti? Jayanti has to do with to win, basically means. Jai means victory, and Jayanti means like to win. And Bhai comes from the word Vishesh, which has to do with a special, to win in a special way, or a special type of victory. So in other words, he who had a special type of victory gets a special garland. Like when you have the gold medal, silver medal, and bronze medal, Bhai Jayanti garland. That's like the whatever, above everything else. No? So he who gets a special victory gets a special garland. And of course, what's the special victory that Krishna has obtained? Complete victory over the hearts of the Brajavasis, basically. No? Complete conquering the heart of the Brajavasis, especially the gopis in this particular case. So here, by mentioning Krishna wearing Bhai Jayanti garland, the implication is, again, Krishna has won over the gopis' hearts completely. Still already in Purvara, they have not been first official meeting, but he has conquered them totally in the distance, basically, in this anticipation of meeting. And of course, we can play with the idea and we say, well, what makes Krishna being the victor here? Actually, the fact that he's at the same time defeated by the love of his devotees. No? We can always take the two sides. Now, to be defeated by love is the real victory, basically. No? Achyuta becomes Chuta, Ajita becomes Jita, no? The inconquerable becomes conquered, the infallible becomes fallible in the context of divine love, and so on. No? So in this way, we always also try to invoke the victory. May divine love, may bhakti win, triumph over me. No? That's why we like to say, hopefully too much, ki jai, ki jai, ki jai, ki jai. It's not just like mechanical thing. Oh, every time someone says ki, you have to say jai. So you are attempting ki, jai, jai, jai. But actually you are trying to move, may those personalities, no? Sri Gurudev, Mahaprabhu, whoever is before the ki jai, may they be victorious over me. May not ego, lust, hunger, and so many stuff may victorious over me. May I be defeated by mercy, by the grace of Sri Guru and the Vaishnava, and so on. So in this way, Krishna is wearing this Bhai Jayanti Mala to show how he's always conquering his devotees and he's always conquered by his devotees, because he reciprocates accordingly. He loves to be conquered by them. So let's go to the third line. Trying to be a little bit more brief today, with your permission. So the third line says, Randram Benur Adhara Sudaya Purayam Gopa Vrindaya. So let's analyze almost all the words of the line. Randram Benur Adhara Sudaya Purayam. So Randram means the holes. Benur means of his flute. So the holes of his flute. Adhara means his lips, generally referring to the lower lip. Sudhaya means with the nectar, and Apurayam, which means he filled up completely. Remember, as we said the other day, Ashrutya. Shrutya is hearing, and Ashrutya means the gopis heard the song completely. Now, Purayam means to fill, and Apurayam is filling up completely. So he completely filled the holes of his flute with the nectar of his lips. So after having described some elements, some attributes, peacock feather, clothes, different elements by Jayanti Mala, finally we get to the flute. Remember, we are in the Venu-gita, so the flute is the main character here. But gradually Sukadeva Goswami is reaching this point in the verse. And again, as we mentioned the other day, Sukadeva could have been said, Krishna played the flute. Again, sometimes in Shastra, conciseness it's a virtue, but in terms of writing Shastra and being concise and giving a message, yeah, that's good. But in terms of rasa, sometimes being concise is lost, because sometimes you need to express certain details to invoke proper rasa, and you need some time and space for that. So here we see that Sukadeva Goswami, he has chosen to the side of rasa, if you will, not the side of conciseness. He didn't say Krishna played the flute, but he said Krishna completely filled the holes of his flute with the nectar of his lips. And then one would say, well, you could have said he played the flute, but it's not the same. It's not conveying the same. Know how the gopis experience that flute playing. So that's why he's using this particular expression here. And we should appreciate that lack of conciseness for the sake of rasa, because it's giving us a particular emotional disposition. So, interestingly, in connection to the flute, some brief words. Of course, we could speak about the flute. We are trying to do so many things. But generally, to say that if anyone, after attaining Krishna's association, still has some holes, to say it's a matter of great distress. Imagine you become a direct associate of Krishna and you still have holes like defects. That's not very becoming, if you will. But in this particular case, the flute is like the exception to that rule. No? Permanent companion of Krishna, full of holes. But Krishna somehow he wants to make up for that. No, it's like, okay, my associates shouldn't have holes, no? Shouldn't have any defects. So I have to cover these holes. So that's why Krishna is always engaged in filling up the holes of the flute with the nectar of his lips. So he's always engaged in that situation, basically, not trying to fill those holes, and having his flute at hand. And although sometimes some particular dynamics may be there when Krishna is not seen doing his duty towards the flute, no, for example, but out of the same principle. For example, I don't know if you have ever wondered why the deity, I would say maybe the main deity in the whole Vrindavan, Shri Radha Raman. Generally, if you see a picture of Radha Raman is like this, but generally never has the flute. The flute is generally like on one side here. So have you wondered why is not the flute at hand? Of course, there are many. Sorry?
A straight flute.
Yeah, that's like the technical. There are many layers of reply. One of them is, it doesn't enter. Also, it's a very delicate deity, and Radha Raman eats a lot. So constantly, if they have like input flute, out flute, in flute, out flute, it may be a little bit uncomfortable and impractical. It may damage, because Radha Raman is Shalagram Sila transformed, if you will. But ultimately, sometimes it is said in a more, if you will, a rasic version of it, is that Krishna sometimes is playing the flute and he's seeing Sri Radha, and by seeing Sri Radha, he starts like and becomes so much mesmerized that the flute falls from his hand, but he doesn't even realize that the flute fell, and he continues to and moving the fingers and feeling, but the flute is not. So sometimes that's connected with the darshan that Radha Raman is giving, like having the darshan of Sri Radha and being mesmerized by that. But of course, applying to us, in our case, we should be like a flute in one sense. No, although we may have real holes, real defects, we may be really hollow, at least myself. We have to allow ourselves to be filled by Krishna, basically. Now we have to allow ourselves to be, that Krishna may pour his love on us in the form of Parampara, Sri Guru and Vaishnavas. As Guru Maharaj will say, you have to feel the pores of your sadhaka deha with bhakti samskars. That's another way of putting that in practical sadhaka-like terms. No? Make every pore of your being be filled with impressions, devotional impressions, bhakti samskars. That's how we will attain an eventually a fully spiritual identity. To the point that your body becomes worthy of being a body of an associate of Bhagavan, like the flute. So the flute is giving that example. He's full of holes, but he's filled with the nectar of Bhagavan, and allowing that, not putting an obstacle to that, and allowing the Bhagavan may express himself through the flute. So we are to follow in those footsteps to that point. So Bibrat Randhram Benur Adhara Sudaya Purayan. So Krishna is filling the holes of the flute with Adhara Sudaya. So with the nectar of his lips. Another word for Adhara Sudaya, Adhara means lips. Adhara Sudaya is Adharamrita. That's an expression that is described many times. Mahaprabhu speaks a lot about that. And Adharamrita basically means the nectar of the lips of Krishna. And there are different Adharamritas, basically. One is, of course, his flute song. No? The nectar of his lips is poured into the flute and comes in the form of Venu-gita, a flute song. Or whatever Krishna says, his words, he's singing. Sometimes he speaks or he sings without a flute. That's also Adaramrita. And Krishna Katha, as an extension of that, is Adaramrita. The gopis say, no? Tavakatamritam tapta jivanam. Gopi-gita. So Adaramrita, Amrita, remember, means something which gives immortality. Amrita, non-mrityu, non-death. And Amrita also has a positive content, not just transcending death, but positive progressive immortality, in the words of Tulasida Maharaj. So that's one of the Adaramrita, the form of this sound. Other Adaramrita is the remnants that Bhagavan has tasted, Mahaprasad, whatever Krishna tastes, and he then gives some left over, that's considered Adaramrita. Whatever he eats in the lila, sometimes he's chewing also pan or tambul, and the devotees are receiving those remnants. So we are to honor Mahaprasad ideal in that spirit. That was Mahaprabhu showed in Sri Jagannath Puri, when he will honor Sri Jagannath Mahaprasad. It is say he was not tasting, oh, it's salty, it's whatever, this and that, but he was experiencing the saliva of Jagannath. That was his subjective experience of honoring Adaramrita, because remember, it's the nectar of the lips of Bhagavan. And of course, another form of Adaramrita, which is more exclusive to the to the Braja Gopis in Madhurya Bhavi, is Krishna's kissing. That's another form of nectar of the lips. So mostly we have this, for the Gopis, ultimately the Amrita of Krishna is his Adhara. His lips are the nectar, which for the Gopis is like the goal of goals, the sixth goal above Prem even. Prem is Panchama Purusartha, here you have another one. So all these are Adaramrita. The song of the flute, the remnants, and the nectar of the lips in the form of kissing. And again, as we gave the example the other day, in Ayurveda, there is this notion of rasayan or elixir or tonic, you say, that you can take not only for getting free from sickness, but also for remaining healthy and increasing your health. So it's not something that also takes out the bad things, but preserves the nice one and improves them. So it is say that this other Amrita has these two purposes. Harikatha is the same thing. You don't only hear Harikatha when you are a conditioned soul to get out of Maya, if you will. And now I'm free from Maya, I don't need Harikatha. Tell that to Sukadev Goswami. He was brought from Jivan Mukta stage by the strength of Harikatha. And he was shown, you can be on a liberated platform and still Harikatha is having, not only still is having effect, but at that platform, that Harikatha will have its biggest effect, we could say. On the post-liberated stage, that's when you will really have the full-fledged experience of all the angas of bhakti. So in the case of the flute, again, we are here describing the flute. The other Amrita sometimes is called Nada Amrita. Nada means like sound. So nectarian sound, which comes, as we mentioned, which makes the species of the forest, the unmovable species to move, the movable species to not move. We will see that in the verses of the Venu-gita eventually. The stones to melt, all the different, like all the natures of the different species become inverted by the sound of the flute. That will be depicted verse after verse in this Venu-gita. Sometimes this other Amrita or Nada Amrita sound, nectar of the flute, is compared to the winter season also, because it comes to retire the hot summer of forest fire of separation of the Brajavasis. No? When they hear the flute, is Krishna is back. No? So they get life from the fire in which they were burning in separation from him. And of course, that Venu is so mesmerizing, so captivating, that sometimes even the gopis in the context of Leela, I mean, they love the flute, but sometimes in the context of Leela, they will engage in not Vastra Harana Leela, that's Krishna stealing the gopis' clothes, but gopis will do Venu Harana Leela. and they will steal Krishna's flute. Like saying, with this little piece of dry bamboo, you are breaking all the vows of all the chaste ladies in Vrindavan. So we will take that out. Stop. And they will start to pass to one gopi to the other and to the, and Krishna will go and try and inspect every gopi's clothes to see, let's see if the flute is here. No, not here. And they pass to another gopi, and it goes in parampara in that way eventually. So this is described also. So Randar Benur Adhara Sudaya Purayan. Then it says Gopa Brinde, the third line, but we will reserve that phrase for the last part because it's in connection to the last idea of the verse. So let's go to the last line of the verse, which says Brindaranya Sapada Ramanam, and we stop there. Then we will continue with the next idea. So Brindaranyam Swapada Ramanam. So Brindaranya means Brindavan, basically. Aranya means forest. So the forest of Brinda, the forest which belongs to Brinda, Brindaranya, Brindavan. Swapada means his own feet. Remember, Swa, his own, Pada, feet. Again, general meaning, official meaning. Then we will go to the other ones. And Ramanam. Ramanam means enchanting. So we could say because of his feet, the forest of Vrindavan becomes enchanting or something like this. Sanatana Goswami explains that this particular line implies that Brindaranya, specifically the name is given, is orchestrated by Brinda. Remember, it's her forest. And it's orchestrated by her in such a way that it becomes Ramana for Krishna's Swapada. In other words, Brinda is orchestrating the forest in such a way that it becomes charming for the feet of Krishna. That's another way of saying that. Brinda is making all the arrangement in her forest, so Krishna's feet experience charm when entering it at every single step. So all the words can be ordered in different ways to present different meanings. Of course, the very land in itself, Bhumi, in Vrindavan, is also receiving that darshan. It is, the earth is described as a woman, and it is said that Vrindavan, in this case, poetically speaking, will be planet Earth is the lady, Vrindavan is the forehead of the lady, and Krishna's footprints in Vrindavan is the sindur on the forehead of the lady, like this red line that the married lady uses to show loyalty to her husband. So Bhumi is married with Krishna. We know the Leela when she marries Varahadev. That's a long story to share now, but by extension, Krishna is married with her, so she's showing her chastity to him by having the sindur of Krishna's reddish feet on her forehead, basically. Sometimes, if you appreciate the land of Vrindavan and some of its features, the land in itself may seem a little rough. Today, Guru Maharaj was speaking, of course, how that's not happening indeed, because one version is like the cows themselves will tell Yashoda, you want to come with Krishna to the forest because of your Vatsal, you have to stay here, sorry, but we will take care of him. We'll say that the cows are in Vatsalya, so that's like the Vatsalya embassy in the forest. Yashoda cannot be there with her Vatsalya camp, but the cows are somehow, and with their hooves, they are making all the dust and bring down the earth, like if it will be like how do you say when you go to the beach? Sandy, in a very sandy, very soft way. And it's pleasing to Krishna. Even in some places there may be some rocks, he may be walking here and there, and that's the trauma of Yashoda. Krishna loves to walk barefoot there. That's the land is Chintamani, remember. So as rough as it may seem externally, still is Chintamani even. It's his supreme abode. I mean, Krishna chooses that specific land to walk barefoot, that he never walks barefoot anywhere else. So sometimes the parallel is given. Okay, the land seems harsh, but still is Chintamani. And sometimes some sadhus may be harsh in some aspect of their personality, but still there may be Chintamani also. There may be sadhus, basically. Krishna is filling those holes of the flute, if you will. If you want to mention it. Rupa Goswami says in the Upadeshamrita, sometimes you have to overlook some defects in the personality of of the acquired nature of a particular sadhu, which may be there. Krishna makes some arrangement that he became a pure devotee, she became a pure devotee, but some aspect of his, her personality remains there, like if it were a hole, if it were a defect. But Krishna's actually filling that hole with the nectar of his lips, if you will. And that so-called defect remains like to add charm to the whole equation, to put us to test so many things simultaneously. Like Rupa Goswami said, you can see some foam in the Ganga, but do not think, oh, Ganga is contaminated now. Oh, our vision is contaminated of Ganga. So in this way, Vrindavan may seem rough, harsh in certain aspects, but at the same time, Krishna is making that his own land, his own place. So we have to see above the apparent defects. And again, there Krishna is walking barefoot. We worship that God, a God who is at home in full. Krishna is the God of informality, walking barefoot at home. Other forms of the divine, you won't see that. In other realms, for example, I don't know, Bhagavan, you never hear Bhagavan is barefoot. Bhagavan Narayan is always wearing padukas, like sandals. Even when he's riding on Garuda, it is said that he does not leave he's Narayan, of course. So he's God, he cannot be barefoot. So he's always having these jewel-studded padukas with him, basically. But again, Krishna in Vrindavan, he's roaming barefoot with the cows, as Guru Maharaj always mentioned. Cows are going barefoot. I have to follow my dharma. I have to empathize with them. I'm going barefoot as well. And of course, the arrangement of Krishna going barefoot is that the land of Braj is receiving all the footprints directly of Krishna, with all the different marks that are in his foot soles. The flag, the thunderbolt, to study each of those marks, that's another series altogether. And as we mentioned also, Vrindavan is preserving, all the inhabitants of Vrindavan are preserving these footprints that Krishna leaves on the ground daily. Do not ask me how, because Guru Maharaj was saying today, how many billions and trillions and quadrillions of cows are there, but somehow, whenever the cows are roaming, they see Krishna's footprints, and they walk in such a way that they are not, any of them, any single cow, any single calf with any single leg are stepping over one single footprint of Krishna. Do not start to make the calculation. You're seeing some smoke coming from your ears now. You have to go there and find it for yourself. It's what Prabhupada will say. No? But the point is that all the inhabitants of Braj are preserving these footprints as worshipable items. So all Vrindavan is adorned by that. And at this point, maybe someone may say, okay, yes, I understand. Vishnu he's wearing padukas and so on, but what about Sri Ramachandra? Ramachandra, of course, as a king in Ayodhya, he's also, as a king, he won't be barefoot, but when he went in exile to the forest, he was barefoot there. Yes, of course, but it's another way of being barefoot. Of course, that was a forced one. You have to go to exile to the forest. It was not in his agenda, if you will, in one sense. But the point that Krishna is not only walking barefoot in Vrindavan, but it is said that he even is eating the dust of Vrindavan. And of course, this is not only in his lila when he's eating dirt, and Krishna has been accused by his friends to Yashoda, like Krishna ate there, he ate there. So Yashoda say, I want to see earth. Okay, you want to see earth? You will see earth. And she saw planet Earth and so many planet Earths inside the planet Earth, and like a mamushka that never ended, like open. But also interestingly, and as we will see these days with Guru Maharaj's Brahma Vimohan Leela narration, in his Brahma Vimohan Leela, he also ate dirt, ate Krishna's Vrindavan's soil, because when he for 1 year took the form of the calves in Vrindavan, he was the calves. And the calves is eating what? Grass. And when you're eating grass, you're eating dirt also. That's part of the equation. When you take out the grass, some dust of Vrindavan is there. So for a whole year, in many different forms, Krishna was honoring the dust of Braj also. So that's a unique way as in Krishna's choosing to honor the dust of Vrindavan, which again has to do with the affection that we find there. As Guru Maharaj always says, you measure the greatness of the place not because of external size and the dimension, but because of affection. He will say Brahman seems too big, omnipresent everywhere. Vaikuntha seems smaller, you have forms and so on. And Vrindavan seems even smaller, like uncivilized village people. But if you analyze in terms of affection, Vrindavan is bigger than all the other realms. And if you have that big love, big ideal, small place is enough. Guru Maharaj will give the example of Mahaprabhu in the Gambira. If you have been to Gambira in Jagannath Puri, when Mahaprabhu spent his last 12 years like in quarantine, basically, that's real quarantine. And the room is so small. I mean, it's 2 per 2 or something like that. But Guru Maharaj will say, small room, big ideal. So he never felt, oh, this is too small, because his ideal was so big. But if you are thrown in the Sahara Desert with no big ideal, it's like, oh, I feel suffocated here. I need more space, more love, basically. So, Swapada Ramanam. So, Pada also, apart from feet, we have been speaking now about Krishna's feet, Krishna footprints, and so on. Pada also can mean abode. Sometimes you have heard maybe Vishnupad. Vishnupad also has to do with the abode of Vishnu, or Vaikuntha, or the spiritual world. So Swapada Ramanam, in this particular case that Charas explained, will mean that Krishna implies, or Sukadev implies in this verse, that this Vrindavan, we are in the context of Vrindavan, where Krishna is entering this forest, is more enchanting than Krishna's abode of Vaikuntha, Vishnu's abode, or any other abode for that matter, which is not Vrindavan. So the Acharyas have poetically described Swapada Ramanam. This place, which Krishna's Swa is his own abode, Pada means abode, Swapada his own abode, Ramanam, charming, more charming than any other. That's when he wants to enter barefoot in direct contact with it. Or Pada also can mean verses or poetry. Maybe you have heard about this expression in Pada. Pada referred to a particular verse. So Swapada Ramanam in this case will mean refer to Krishna as he who gets Ramanam. In this case can be like enchanted or even decorated by Swapada, by the sweet verses or sweet poetry of Swa. Swa means also his own, those who are his own people, his close associate. So Krishna is he who gets charmed, or he who gets decorated, he who gets beautified by the sweet poetry of his close companion. And of course, in this case, the immediate application is Krishna's entering the forest, as we will see with the Gopas singing his glories. So the Sakas are composing spontaneous poetry while entering Vrindavan forest, glorifying Krishna, and he becomes ornamented by that. And his beauty increases by that particular love. Or, of course, every member of Vrindavan is doing that. Yashoda, while she's churning butter in the morning, it is said that in the Bhagavatam it is described, how her bangles and the turning rod and all the things act like the mridanga and the kartals, and she's a one lady kirtan. She doesn't need the whole kirtan party. She herself is doing. Sometimes you go to India and sometimes they have a kirtan machine. I don't know if you have seen that. No, that's scary, but no problem. So you press on and they start to boom, 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 boom. But in Golok Vrindavan, they do not need that. Yashoda has the bangles, which are like the cymbals, and her voice, and the turning rod is like the drum, and she's composing a spontaneous songs and poetry for Krishna while absorbing, making butter for him, and so on. So the Gopas are doing that, as we will see. Yashoda is doing that, or the Gopis will be doing that. There will be Swapada Ramanam, will be pleasing and ornamenting Krishna with poetry of their own, like we will see in the Venu-gita, this totally spontaneous song that comes out of their hearts. So Swa, again, the word Swa, Swapada Ramanam. Swa means one's own. Like if I refer to someone who is so intimate to me, like I consider me like my very being, like an extension of my being, I will say Swa. They are my own. That is something that implies possessiveness. No, so it refers, of course, here to all his Krishna's own, his devotees, the gopas, the cows, his parents, gopis, ultimately Sri Radha. And in this connection, in connection to Sri Radha, so we finished this section also going back to Sri Radha. When we speak about Swabhada Ramanam, or the feet of Krishna, or the feet, or the Vrindavan possessing the foot dust of Krishna, we could also say Vrindavan possesses the foot dust of Sri Radha, basically. No? That's how Krishna likes to see the dust of Vrindavan. That's how he likes especially to roll on that, to have Abhishek, basically, on Sri Radha's foot dust, on Vrindavan foot dust. Now, this is very nice verse from Pranam Mantra to Sri Radha by Prabodhananda Saraswati and Radha Rasa Sudhinidhi. Vrindavanishwari Tabaiva Padara Bindam Premamritaika Makaranda Raso Bhapurnam Vidyarpitam Madhupatir Smaratapamogram Nirbhapayat Parama Shitalam Ashrayami. I offer pranam. Sri Krishna says, Sri Krishna is the most condensed form of ecstasy, but the only way that he can put off the fire of desire in his heart is by rolling at the feet of Sri Radha, taking those feet and putting those feet on his heart. And Prabhupada Saraswati says, I take shelter of those feet, basically. So in this way, no, Radha's feet means the dust of Braj, her foot dust. Krishna is blessed, feeling himself successful. That's the very zenith of the Gita Govind, Dehi Pada Palavamudaram. No? But Jayadev Goswami say, oh, I think this idea is too much. I don't know if I should write this. No? That Krishna is saying, I put my head on the feet of Sri Radha, and I want to decorate my head with the lotus petals of her lotus feet. And Jayadev's thought, maybe I'm getting, it's too much. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting dysfunctional. Nobody said this before. And as you know, he left the place. He returned. I say, I will go for a walk, take some fresh air, and continue writing. Maybe I'm getting too much, who knows, distracted or intense. And when he returns, he realizes that Krishna, her wife, is sitting prasad and say, why didn't you wait for me? Say, you already finished your lunch like an hour ago. I say, I'm just coming. No, you ate. And Jayadev Goswami is like, what's going on? So he's seeing where he was writing, and the place where the palm leaves he was using were put in different way as he left when he left. And he went and he saw that Krishna himself came disguised as Jayadev Goswami. And he wrote that line himself, like confirming, yes, you are not dysfunctional. I'm dysfunctional because of Radha's prem. Krishna say, dysfunctional in the good sense of the term. Now, I put my head at her feet. I want to decorate with her. So again, we see, according to the eyes of the Acharyas, how the presence of Sri Radha in the Bhagavatam is coming over and over again, indirectly, in Parokshabad, not overtly, because that's the way of the Bhagavatam, that's the way of Kavya, of romantic love, of indirect speech. You are not saying that in your face, basically, but in a suggested meaning. And so many other sections. So let's go to the last the last part of the verse, which says Gopa Brindair Pravishat Gita Kirti. I mean, it doesn't say like that in that order in the verse, but that's how you should put the words for them to make sense. Gopa Brindair Pravishat Gita Kirti. So Gopa Brindair means by a multitude of Gopas. Pravishat means entered. He entered, Krishna entered the forest, basically. Remember, we were speaking about the forest. So he entered accompanied by a multitude of Gopas and Gita Kirtihi, with his glories being sung. As we mentioned, the Gopas were accompanying Krishna and performing Guna Kirtan, Lila Kirtan spontaneously. So the Gopas proceeded with Krishna in multitudes, and surrounding Krishna from every side. Remember, Jashoda also told them, you surround my Lala. You go Sridham on the west, you Madhumangal in the east, and you on the north, and you on the south, and you take the weapons in case some demons appear, and you protect him. So kind of they were obeying Jashoda here, like surrounding him. Of course, when they start playing and everyone starts to go everywhere. But at this point, they are like surrounding Krishna. So they are loudly declaring through guna kirtan and different forms of praise. Oh, the gate of our Krishna defeats, as we mentioned, the elephant. The elephant had to left to the forest due to shame and things like this. No? And they glorify his expertise in playing the flute and all the qualities properly glorified by his sakas. No? His valor, you say? Valor, no? Like his bravery, like the sakas appreciate those type of things and other other qualities. Baladev Vidyabhushan, he comments on this verse saying that actually the Gita Kirti part, his glories being sung, refers to the Devas from the sky glorifying Krishna's entrance to the forest. So that's another possibility, as Guru Maharaj was telling today, how the Devas appeared when Krishna killed, was Vatsasura or Bakasura, one of the two, and they started throwing flower petals from the sky. So this can be said in this case as well. Or something very interesting that Sanatana Goswami comments in this connection. He says the term Gita Kirti, his glories being sung, can also refer to Gita Kirti Gopinam Yashmin, which means he, Krishna, he for whom the fame of the gopis is sung by some gopas after perceiving a special bhava in Krishna. I repeat, he for whom the fame of the gopis is sung by some gopas after perceiving a special bhava in Krishna. In other words, there are some gopas, Priyanarma Sakas, of course, that are perceiving some special bhava in Krishna in connection to his romantic life, and they will sing some things about the fame of the gopis to him, like to enthuse in this particular direction. And interestingly, he's saying that Baladev is not mentioned in this verse in particular, although he's there, but he's not mentioned. He was mentioned before, as we already mentioned. He will be mentioned after, but he's not mentioning here because it may be seen out of place to invoke the elder brother in such moment where the Priyanarma Sakas are perceiving Krishna's certain mood in connection to the gopis, and as we know, the presence of the elder brother may create some dojis here, no? So the thing may become dissipated. So although he's there, he's not invoked in the praise in this particular connection to preserve the proper experience. Jiva Goswami similarly comments to this verse saying that there is no mention of Baladev here in terms of Krishna and him being a pair, as sometimes they are depicted. The fact that the divine cowherd ladies are solely fixed on Krishna suggests that the description with his companionship is only due to being his assistant. So again, Baladev, of course, is assisting Krishna in his union with the gopis, but in a particular way fitting his role as the Maryad Purush in Krishna's life, the elder brother, by looking somewhere else, as we know, and taking care of the other gopas. But later we will see, interestingly, also the gopis will quote Krishna and Balaram, but they will use, in the good sense of the term, the presence of Balaram as to take the attention as to be sure that nobody is suspecting from them, because they are glorifying the two of them, but actually they're using Baladev as a way of their focusing in Krishna, helping Baladev is serving, facilitating that in that way as well. Shri Balaram ki jai. So some words regarding this very unique, nice verse. And as I think I mentioned yesterday, just to finish, there are other two verses in the Bhagavatam which almost are identical with this one. So there are three main verses along the Bhagavatam which describe the sweetness of Krishna's beauty, of Krishna's form. One appears before this verse, one appears after this verse, and this is in between. So I'll share the verses with you very quickly, and we will mention a few things to see how this particular verse we are seeing these days is supreme among those three. So the first one who appears before this verse, it's actually the very first verse of the Brahma Stuti, first verse of chapter 14 of the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. So it's the first prayer of Brahma after being totally deluded, if you will. So he's in a particular spirit, you can imagine, repentful after having done a particular mess and crying and begging forgiveness to Krishna. So Lord Brahma says, My dear Lord, you are the only worshipable Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore I offer my humble obeisances and prayers just to please you. O Son of the King of the Cowherds, your transcendental body is dark blue like a new cloud. Try to follow the similar description to this verse. Your garment is brilliant like lightning, and the beauty of your face is enhanced by your gunja earrings and the peacock feather on your head. Wearing garlands of various forest flowers and leaves, and equipped with a herding stick, a buffalo horn, and a flute, you stand beautifully with a morsel of food in your hand. So that's first of all Brahma's prayers. First verse, chapter 14, 10th canto. The second verse, which in this case will be the third one, the second, I mean, we are seeing here, but this comes after the one we are studying, Srimad Bhagavatam 10, 23, 22. And this has been spoken by the Dvija Patnis, or the wives of the Brahmanas who were not willing to feed Krishna and his friends, as you know, the Leela, and Krishna and Krishna's friends went to beg food from the wives of the Brahmanas, and eventually they prayed to Krishna as follows. His complexion was dark blue and his garment golden, wearing a peacock feather, colored minerals, sprigs of flower buds, and a garland of forest flowers and leaves. He was dressed just like a dramatic dancer. He rested one hand upon the shoulder of a friend, and with the other twirled a lotus. Lilies graced his ears, his hair hung down over his cheeks, and his lotus-like face was smiling. And then we have the present one, the verse we are seeing, having seen yesterday and today. So of course, all of these verses are great, beautiful, and very similar if you pay close attention. If we want to compare them from Tatastha Vichar, from a neutral point of view, we will see that it's evident that the beauty, the sweetness of Krishna's beauty as manifested in the heart of the gopis is considered the topmost, no? Because in the first verse, Brahma, again, his mood, although he's projecting, as we know, for Sakya Bhav, at this precise moment, he's totally shocked after the mess he made in so he's praying with a mix of awe and reverence and repentful, and he's using certain words. For example, Nomi in the verse, Nomi means obeisances. No, gopis won't say to Krishna, I offer obeisances. Actually, they will say, put your head on the ground at the feet of our Ishwari or something like that. Or he's using the word Idya in this verse. Idya means like supremely worshipable person. So they are like Ishvaric terms, which somehow, if you will, dilute the sweetness of the expression, nonetheless beautiful and glorious of its own. And then the Dvija Patnis, the second verse we saw, the wives of the Brahmanas, we know they are not gopis. They are ladies, but they are not entitled to enter and relish the Madhurya Bhav that the gopis relish. Now, interestingly, to say that Krishna never, they wanted to join Krishna in Madhurya Rasa, but Krishna respected Varna Ashram sensibilities. Today, Guru Maharaj was speaking about that, Varna Ashram, after lunch or during lunch. So he said, what did Krishna say? The gopis came, the Dvija Patnis came. I say, well, you are Brahman ladies, Brahmanis. I'm Vaisya. It's not proper mixing. No? So there's, interestingly, although we decry, you say, downplay Varna Ashram, Sarva Dharma Paritaja, blah, blah, blah. When you make full circle and you get to the Leela, you're like, oh, Varna Ashram is operative here. No? In the context of the Leela, there is an instructor of Varna Ashram, and Krishna, on a certain level, he's respecting that. The Brahmanas are coming to meet him, but he said, but we are not compatible. You are Brahman ladies, I'm Vaisya. Of course, he's Abhira, there is some Brahman portion, but according to this social sensibilities of the Leela, that will have not been seen properly. So he honors their prayer, but do not dance Rasa Leela with the Dvija Patnis or something. So these Dvija Patnis, also their mood is not full Madhurya of Vrindavan, of the gopis. They are kind of in the borderline between Aishwarya and Madhurya. And that's kind of also depicted by the geographical location in which, interestingly, these Dvija Patnis are offering these prayers to Krishna, which is just like the meeting point between Mathura and Vrindavan. So it's not inside Vrindavan, but it's just on the borderline, representing their bhava is in that borderline as well. No? So according to their mood, they are praying. And then again, when we go to this verse, invoked by the gopis through Sukadeva Goswami, we see here the ultimate limit of Krishna's Nava Kishore Natavar form is springing from the gopis' heart, basically. And again, Krishna's beauty, Krishna's sweetness, Krishna's form appears relative to the love in the hearts of the devotee. So remember, we have to relate these two things over and over again. Love of Krishna in a devotee's heart and Krishna's form to reciprocate to that love. So Krishna's beauty manifests exactly according in exact reciprocation to the love a devotee has for them. Sadavo hridayam mayam sadunam hridayantraham madanyatina janantina ham tevya managapi. It is said in the Bhagavatam. I am the heart of my devotees, they are my heart. I don't know anyone apart from them, they do not know anyone apart from me. Period. And Krishna gets lost there. So it's this unique love that the gopis are having. Of course, the Brajavasis here, we are speaking about the gopis in particular. This is the unique love that make Krishna appear in this unique form that is depicted in this 5th verse. And it is this unique love which will give rise to the Venu-gita, which has not yet started officially. Still we are preparing the stage for that. Again, Venu-gita starts in verse 7. This is verse 5. In the next meeting, verse 6, it kind of starts to describe the previous verse to the Venu-gita. So, and according to Jiva Goswami, actually this 5th verse and the 6th verse should go together. They make like one unit. But I won't see verse 6 today. That will be too much. So we will see verse 6 on Friday, I think. Because tomorrow we don't have lecture. On Thursday we have Q&A. And on Friday we will see the 6th verse of the Venu-gita. And from that on, from verse 7 till 19, Venu-gita proper, if you will, officially starts there. So thank you so much. And see you very soon. Srila Gurudev ki jai. Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai. Sri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Sri Dauji Gopal ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Sri Venu-gita ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanand. Vancha kalpataru vyasta kripa sindhu vacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.